Hello, my friends. Happy Sunday. So glad to see you. Hope you've had a great week. Hey, today we're going to talk about something that is really special to me, and that's family. And did you know that God has given you the family you're in? Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small. They look different, but He's also watched, I think we've seen as we've studied these characters from the Bible, that He has a path. And it's not just your immediate family, but generations of family that have led you to where you are now, to who you are now. So I thought I'd give you a little example of that with Isabella. You guys all know Bella. Well, she was a firstborn in our family, firstborn grandchild. And so she has 3 names because we named her after 3 of her grandmas. All right, so this is Isabel. And so her first name's Isabella, right? So this is Isabel. It was her great grandmother. And then this is Therese, and this was her great grandmother. And then this is Diane, who is her grandmother. So she had 3 grandmothers that she was named after, and all 3 of them came from a different part of our family and a different path that they have that all come together to be our Isabella. All right, so you guys will see, especially as we've studied all these Bible characters, how it's not just them. Like, let's talk about Abraham. Now, Abraham, he never thought he would have a family, right? He was so old. He and Sarah were so old. They thought, never could we have a baby. Sarah even laughed when she heard she was going to have a baby, didn't she? But she did, even in her old age. And there was Abraham and Sarah having Isaac. And so we know the generations of that. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. God had that plan all working through that family, right? And then what about a family like Esther's family? Esther lost her parents, and so she was basically adopted or fostered by who? By Mordecai, right? But God had that all in His plan. He knew that Mordecai needed to be the one to be taking care of Esther when she became queen. He knew that she would be brave because of what Mordecai had built into her and given to her, and all the information that Mordecai provided to Esther, right? And then what about when we talked about Samuel a couple of weeks ago? Samuel's mom prayed and prayed and prayed. Oh, she wanted a baby so badly. And finally, when she had the baby, she took him to live with Eli because she knew that God had a purpose for him, and that's where he would learn to be a priest. And so Eli's family, those 2 sons, they were not following the Lord, but Samuel was there. And so he took like the next family line of Eli, the priest family. How cool is that? Right? So families can be all different. We're going to read about one today that's not traditional family, but has a great family line, and you're going to see by the end of the story how amazing this is. All right, this is a story of a woman named Naomi and a woman named Ruth. Have you guys heard this? All right, hope you guys will learn something new. I'm going to read it to you out of this Bible. I'm not going to read every word, so if you have this, go back and read it together as a family. But let's talk about it a little bit. All right. So Naomi and her husband, they lived in Bethlehem. And at that time, they were a good, strong family who loved God so much. But at that time, the land had been drying up and there was no food. So finally, the 2 of them got together and they decided, we're going to go over the other side of the Jordan River and we're going to find a place where there's food. And so they left and they moved to Moab. And they had 2 sons with them, and those 2 sons, as they grew and got older, they married 2 women from the land there. But the land of Moab, they were not people who were following the Lord. So they married girls who didn't necessarily grow up as they did, hearing all the stories of God, or as you are, hearing all the stories of God. They were people who didn't know about God. So let's see how that worked in their family. So they lived there. Sorry to say, after a while, Naomi's husband passed away. And then, after a little while longer, both of her sons passed away. So here's Naomi with her 2 daughters. And the 2 young women, they didn't know about God. But they lived with Naomi and her family and saw the whole family worshiping the one true God. And when they heard them telling all the wonderful acts of God, and when they saw how good their husbands had been to them and how sweet Naomi was to them, they made up their minds that they too would worship God. So they had led, Naomi and her sons had led these two women to God, and they were followers. But as the two boys had fallen and they both died, Naomi brought the girls together and she said, "It's time. I'm going to go back to Bethlehem. I've heard that the ground is growing again and things are better there, so I'm going to go back to see where my relatives are. And then you should go back to your relatives. You should go back and live with your mother and father and let them, take care of you." So the three started walking to Bethlehem. It was a several days' journey. After some distance, Naomi said to her daughters, "Thank you so much for walking with me. Go back to your families now. I pray that God will be kind to you as you have been kind to me. May God give you other husbands so that you can be happy again." And so Ruth and Orpah, those were the two daughter-in-laws, they began to cry. They were so sad. They said, "But no, we want to go with you to your country." And Naomi said, "No, my daughters, it's better for you to go back to your own country. It makes me feel sad for your sakes that you've had to live through this trouble with me." So they both began to cry. And after a while, Orpah dried her tears. She hugged Naomi, that was her mother-in-law, and said goodbye and started back to her mom and dad's land. But Naomi said, "See what your sister-in-law is doing? You should go back too." She said this to Ruth. "Now, you better return." But Ruth, she only cried harder. Here's what she said. She threw her arms around her mother-in-law, holding her tight, and said, "Don't make me leave you. I love you, and I want to stay with you." And this is a beautiful verse from the Bible. "Where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God." So Ruth had learned so much about God. She wanted to go and live with Naomi. She loved Naomi, and she was so grateful that Naomi taught her about the one true God that she said, "Now I want to be an Israelite. I want to be a follower of God. I want to live with your people. I want to be your family, Naomi." So beautiful. See how her heart changes when she knows God? Yeah. So when Naomi and Ruth no longer saw that Ruth didn't want to be a heathen anymore, she wanted to follow God, she said, "Come with me." And the two went together back over the Jordan River until they came to Bethlehem. And as you remember, there weren't many mailmen back then, right? And so when they entered Bethlehem, they got there. Nobody had known what had happened to Naomi and to Ruth and Naomi's husband and to her sons. And so they were walking through Bethlehem and people started gathering around. They're like, "Could this be Naomi? Our relative, our friend that we haven't seen in over 10 years? And it was. And they gathered together and Naomi told them what had happened to her sons. And Naomi told them what had happened to her husband. Such bad news shocked the people. And they were very kind to Naomi. And for Naomi's sake, they took Ruth in too. And this is so awesome. They let Naomi and Ruth live in the house where Naomi had grown up. So they were there. She was back amongst people that she had grown up with people that she had loved, and her relatives, her extended family. And Ruth was invited in with a happy heart. They were so glad that she was there. So it just come about the time that the barley was ready to be harvested, and Ruth and Naomi returned. All the fields around Bethlehem were filled with reapers. That was the people cutting down the wheat, right, and the barley. And so as the reapers cut down the barley, they tied it into bundles, working very fast to cover the whole field. But some of the barley fell to the ground. The reapers did not pick up the fallen stalks. Now you'd think if they were doing a good job, they would pick it up, but here's why. For a long time ago, in the time of Moses, God had commanded that the fallen stalks should be left for the poor. So he had put that in line. He said, take what you need to take, but if anything falls, just leave it there for the poor. So here's what Ruth did. She saw the other girls going out. It's called gleaning when they pick that up. And she saw the other girls going around, and she gleaned. And she said, let me go glean too. She goes, I want to be a hard worker. I want to go get some barley, which is food for them, right? And so she went and started gleaning. And Naomi said, go, my daughter. even though she was a daughter-in-law, she wasn't the daughter, right? But she said, go, my daughter. She had taken her in as family. Ruth happened to choose a field which was run by Boaz. And so he went and she went and gleaned every day. One day Boaz came, he was very wealthy, and he came to the fields and he greeted the men and women there and he said, the Lord be with you. What a wonderful way to greet them, right? And they answered, the Lord bless you. And so he saw Naomi and he asked the girl, who was she? And they said, this is the girl who's come with Naomi. And so she was allowed to glean there. And not only was she allowed to glean there, but Boaz called the people together. She said, when you're cutting down the wheat, go ahead and take what you need, but leave a little extra. Leave a little extra for this girl who's come with Naomi, for Ruth. And so they did. And so finally, Boaz heard who she was and was so proud, and so they left extra for her. Ruth gleaned until the evening. She was such a hard worker. And then finally, when she came back to Naomi, Naomi said, where were you gleaning? And she said, it was in a field owned by Boaz. And Naomi was so excited. She said, Boaz, that's one of my cousins. And so, again, the family connection was happening. So this man was a cousin of ours. So Ruth gleaned in Boaz's field to the end of the harvest, and then into the end of the wheat harvest. It was a custom at that time that if someone had died in an Israelite family and left a bride like Ruth, that another one of the family members would marry her. So here's what happened. When Boaz saw the beautiful Ruth gleaning day after day in the fields, he fell in love with her, and he asked her to become his wife. Ruth married Boaz and went to live in the beautiful house. This made Naomi so happy. By and by, a little son was born, and his name was Obed. Naomi took the baby boy in her arms. So she was almost like a grandmother, not in blood, but in family that was connected together. All her neighbors came to see the baby. They said, blessed be the Lord, who in your own age, Naomi, has given you a child to love, this child of your daughter-in-law, who is better to you than 7 sons. She said this Naomi had been loved by Ruth. Ruth had taken care of Naomi in her old age, and now Ruth had had a baby, and Naomi had a baby to love. This child grew up, and he became the grandfather of King David. So Obed was the grandfather of King David. Do you see this family line? How God puts family together? Not always in the most traditional way, but he creates families. In the course of time, from this family came Jesus. So God had a plan. He wanted this family to be together. Naomi lost her husband. She lost her sons, but Ruth came in as a daughter-in-law, someone who didn't even know God at first. But Naomi, being faithful, led Ruth to the Lord. Ruth, being faithful, took care of Naomi. And Boaz was brought in to see Ruth, to fall in love with Ruth, to marry her, to bring this family together, to have a baby that would be the grandfather of King David. And one day, that family line would be the family of Jesus. Guys, I hope you've just enjoyed learning about all these different people and all the plans that God is putting together. Look to your family. Look to see who is it that will be with you no matter what, just like Ruth was with Naomi. Those are the people that God is bringing together for you, because that's your family. I love you guys. Be part of the family of God. God brings you family, and I'll see you next week.